Making headlines for this week of December 26th. You wanna roll. China ramps up its status as a substitute for the IMF and World Bank, creating both anticipation and confusion. False hope. Ukraine's aspirations to join NATO are counterproductive and potentially more divisive for the country. Black swans of change. Russia appears to be holding all the cards for geo-economic shift, despite Western defiance to the contrary. And light therapy education. One school in northern Sweden embarks on pilot project to bring healing light to a high school during the dark season.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. It's a pretty quiet week as far as the geopolitical scene goes. So once again, I lead this week's broadcast with a potentially significant financial news story. I say potential because there are many factors involved that I admit I am still trying to make sense of. So why this story is coming out at this time remains to be seen as to what impact, if any, this story will really have. An article by William Pasek appearing on the BloombergView.com website on December 25th has offered the following. Thanks to China, Christine Lagarde of the International Monetary Fund, Jim Yong Kim of the World Bank, and Takehiko Nakao of the Asian Development Bank may no longer have much meaningful work to do. Beijing's move to bail out Russia on top of its recent aid for Venezuela and Argentina signals the death of the post-war Bretton Woods world. It also marks the beginning of the end for America's linchpin role in the global economy and Japan's influence in Asia. It appears that the deals that China has made with several countries around the world to set up trading hubs for its currency have positioned China to begin moving solidly forward in becoming the option that makes the antiquated system obsolete. Pasek continues, China stepping up its role as lender of last resort upends an economic development game that's been decades in the making. The IMF, World Bank, and Asian Development Bank, ADB, are bloated, change-adverse institutions. Now, of course, these institutions would be adverse to change as they are controlled by the global banking cabal, and they have historically not wanted to share or relinquish any power and control away from this group. Pasek, however, appears to be taking a more negative position on this move, suggesting that in return for their generous support, China would expect loyalty, and this loyalty might come in the form of supporting China on issues ranging from Taiwan to territorial disputes and to putting down Western efforts on issues such as human rights. Pasek is following the cabal journalism party line in believing that Russia is on the verge of collapse. He writes that Beijing's $24 billion currency swap program to help Russia is a sign of things to come. Russia, it's often said, is too nuclear to fail. As Moscow weathers the worst crisis since 1998 default, it's tempting to view China as a good global citizen. But Beijing is just enabling President Vladimir Putin, who's now under zero pressure to diversify his economy away from oil. The same goes for China's $2.3 billion currency swap with Argentina and its $4 billion loan to Venezuela. In the Chinese century, bad behavior has its rewards. Let me comment more on this in a moment. Pasek does attempt to find a silver lining in China dishing out almost $4 trillion to alleged crisis-plagued nations by writing that it might force the IMF, World Bank, and ADB to raise their games. Within the same paragraph, however, he pessimistically shoots that down by stating that, more likely, China's largesse will encourage bad policy habits and impede development in ways that leave the global economy worse off. Here is one possible interpretation, and I am now offering my own personal perspective. And I am not a financial expert, so I ask listeners to use their own personal discernment. I am speaking from the perspective of how I see this story relative to all the other global events happening, and also the shift in human consciousness we are beginning to see and feel worldwide. Pasek is writing from a perspective that is not wrong, but I may say that it is either intentionally or unintentionally incomplete. This depends upon whether Pasek is attempting to plant seeds in support of the global cabal or plant seeds in terms of the truth that is now coming out. If he is knowingly writing for the cabal, then the article suggests that China is on a blind path and it is wasting its money on nations he claims are crisis-plagued. But seriously, what country is not crisis-plagued at this time? If Pasek is working for truth, and he has been authorized to release news about China replacing the IMF and World Bank, then this is a story where one must learn how to discern the gold nuggets from within the rhetoric of a global cabal agenda. The evidence at this time seems to strongly suggest a deliberate attempt by the Western power brokers to use the same game plan on Russia that was used to collapse the Soviet Union. Deflate oil prices and impose sanctions upon the Soviet Union. Boom, the Soviet Union collapsed. Last week, CVN reported that the U.S. began diplomatic ties with Cuba, admitting that sanctions were not working with Cuba, and yet the U.S. is naively attempting to impose sanctions that do not work on a much larger geographic and economic power. Most people are unlikely to have the time or the energy to search out the connections between one story and the next. Russia has not been playing ball with the U.S. attempts to blame Russia for what happened in Ukraine. The truth is already coming out, and even the people in Ukraine are beginning to see that they have been cheated by the U.S., the EU, and by their own politicians in Kiev. The gold from the Ukraine Central Bank is allegedly gone, and this means that it has been confiscated by the banking cabal in exchange for worthless fiat currency loans that the taxpayers are now going to have to pay for. The people of Ukraine should be more than upset at this point. The game is confusing, I admit. The EU is dependent upon oil from Russia, oil that currently comes via the Ukraine. The U.S. would benefit from having Ukraine destabilized and controlled so that Russian oil could not come to Europe. This would be a form of sanction against Russia. With the price low, any oil that Russia can sell would be too cheap to support its petroleum industry. The U.S. could step in and offer oil and gas to Europe, very likely in exchange for more rights to place military bases and weapons closer to Russia. It does not really make sense then that Pasek, in his article, would accuse China of seeking loyalty when this has been exactly the same game that the U.S. and its global cabal handlers have been doing to every other country they have destabilized, including Ukraine. Evidence suggests that Russia is buying gold, and it seems at this time that Russia is actually holding a bigger poker hand than the U.S. In fact, it could be argued that the U.S. is attempting to play a bluff on Russia, but Russia is not buying into it, and Putin is on the verge of calling out the U.S. on this bluff. However, amidst the geopolitical shifts and transformations taking place, there is still the facade of global economic stability, or at least familiarity. People have been accustomed to the current geopolitical and geoeconomic paradigm for all of their lives. Too much shock too quickly would destabilize the whole picture and would not be good for either the old paradigm or the new paradigm being born. Therefore, for a period of time, the people of the world still need to see something that is relatively familiar, that things are functioning at least as they currently understand them. For now, Russia is seen either as the enemy or it is being seen as being about to collapse. Mark my words, Russia is not going to collapse unless the Western media attempts to market a message of some kind of collapse. If China is allegedly bailing out Russia, it would be my wager that it is a form of temporary support as a way of China showing the U.S. that the game is up for them. The Western media, however, in their desperation, are attempting to use this support to their advantage and market it as a sign of imminent collapse. China has a history of waiting until the time is right. They are very patient. The time is now coming for the BRICS alliance to begin showing the global cabal what they are made of. China rarely does anything without knowing the full potential impact of any action it is about to take. One has to know that there is a bigger story to what is happening here. There is a bigger story, and part of it involves the shift in human and planetary consciousness. It is not only a transition to a new physical paradigm of existing, but it is also a transformation of how our species is currently existing. And right now, we are attempting to find that delicate balance between both that facilitate this shift in the most peaceful, the most rapid, and also the safest way possible for as many as possible. Continuing with geopolitical news, also relating to Russia and Ukraine, an article appearing on the RT website on December 23rd has reported that Kiev's latest move to become a NATO ally is counterproductive and gives rise to false hope for resolving its political crisis, according to Moscow. The Ukrainian parliament voted to repeal a law that upheld the country's non-participation in military blocs. The move on Tuesday is a step towards becoming a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, a goal the post-coup authorities in Kiev have made a key point of their foreign policies. Kiev says that Russia is the cause of the civil war that led to eastern parts of the country rebelling against the central government and hopes that NATO's military might will help resolve the situation. RT also has this report.
The NATO alliance itself, the member states will be very divided on this because it's quite clear that this ratchets it up really the dangers, because if Ukraine was to join NATO, then there would be an incredibly dangerous situation, wouldn't we? Because then we'd have the hawks in the US, for example, claiming, how many times have we heard this year, Kevin, of a Russian invasion of Ukraine, all these phantom invasions. That could be the trigger for all-out war. So it's a very dangerous,
I'm perfect. We started this by saying, how soon could it happen? Let's wind it back. Is it likely to happen? Would they allow it to happen?
Well, there is the, if you look at the NATO expansion sort of documents, they say that it's preferable if states actually who have territorial disputes with neighbours, that these are resolved through the OSCE process. It doesn't actually prohibit countries that have territorial disputes from joining. But the inference is that states wouldn't be allowed in if they have outstanding territorial disputes, which of course Ukraine does have with Russia, and has disputes with Donbass and Crimea. But NATO has broken its own rules in the past. We've seen that many times. We saw NATO break its own rules when it bombed Yugoslavia in 1999. Yugoslavia was not actually a member state, so NATO went way beyond its charter in doing that. So NATO could bend its rules again and get Ukraine in. I think there'll be certain countries in the NATO alliance who will want Ukraine in, if you like, the more hawkish countries, and other countries will be pretty terrified at the prospect, let's face it, because this, as I said, would be a very dangerous step, and it would make an all-out war much closer, really. Also, thoughts from the Russian side of this happened. PM Dmitry Medvedev for Russia says Ukraine joining NATO, quote, would turn the country into its enemy, and what would the repercussions be? This is a very provocative step from Poroshenko just a few days before Christmas, and I think that it's only going to increase tensions between Ukraine and Russia. I think it's a very unwise step. It's certainly not in Ukraine's best interest. And is it really democratic? Because while you've got 60 to 70% of people in the West, according to polls, in favour of Ukraine joining NATO, you've got much less than that, sort of 40% less than that, around 20% or so, wanting it in the East. And so the country is very, very divided. And this is about the last thing that Poroshenko should be doing. He wants to bring his people together.
Well, that's exactly what Russia's foreign minister has been talking about, Sergei Lavrov. He said that the crisis in the east would not be helped if Ukraine joins NATO. Right now, it's a divided country. How could a divided country go into it fully all together? I mean, how do we know that's what the whole country wants, to go into NATO?
But it doesn't, does it? And I think that's why neutrality is the most sensible policy. When you've got an extremely divided country with radically different opinions on this, in one half of the country to the other half, then the sensible step is, of course, a policy of neutrality.
So who's pushing it? I think you say that's the sensible step, so
yeah.
why not take the sensible step and do the sensible thing?
Well, we've got to be a bit cynical now, I'm afraid, and the fact is the United States put an awful lot of money. We know the amounts they put in, the billions of dollars they put in to try to bring about a change of government in Ukraine, which they succeeded in earlier this year. And did they really pull that money in, Kevin, just to have a government following the same policy of neutrality? No, I think the United States very clearly wanted regime change in Ukraine because precisely they wanted to get Ukraine in NATO, as they've wanted to get other countries bordering Russia into NATO. That's been their strategy over the past 15, 20 years or so. So I think that Poroshenko, is very likely he's coming under pressure from the US to actually embark on this path because, as I said, an awful lot of money and time was invested in this project of bringing about a new government in Ukraine by the US and the EU, of course. And I think the aim of the game was to lock the country into what we call Euro-Atlantic structures, which on the one hand is getting the Ukraine on the path towards EU membership, and on the other hand, locking it into NATO.
In commenting on the new Ukrainian legislation, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was quoted in the article as saying that this is counterproductive. It only escalates the confrontation and creates the illusion that the internal national crisis in Ukraine can be solved through adoption of laws like that. A much more productive and sensible way would be to finally start a dialogue with the part of the Ukrainian people that were ignored when the coup was staged. Lavrov called upon Ukrainian President Poroshenko to initiate constitutional reform, something to which the government in Kiev had pledged to do last April. In a separate article dated on December the 18th, RT had reported Russian President Putin as saying that if the West had called the organizers of Ukraine's coup to order and took a different position, there wouldn't be a civil war in Ukraine. Putin expressed regret that the planned exchange of prisoners between Kiev and self-defense troops in eastern Ukraine on Wednesday was disrupted by Kiev. On the 25th, there was an agreement to exchange 30 people. The representatives of self-defense troops arrived at the place of prisoners' exchange. An official from Kiev authorities appeared and said, "No, we won't exchange the prisoners until the Minsk talks." The article added that Putin urged both Kiev and self-defense forces to exchange prisoners before the Christmas holidays using the all-for-all principle. I think they should exchange all for all without any conditions. I believe that people, meaning the prisoners, should be returned home before New Year, before Christmas, regardless of circumstances. Another story coming out on a significant number of alternative news websites this week is the leaking of a document that teaches operatives how to infiltrate the EU. The following was posted on December 21st on the WikiLeaks website. Today, December 21st, 2014, WikiLeaks releases 2 classified documents by a previously undisclosed CIA office detailing how to maintain cover while traveling through airports using false ID, including during operations to infiltrate the European Union and the Schengen passport control system. This is the second release within WikiLeaks' CIA series, which will continue in the new year. RT's report on this story wrote that the first of the documents, dated September of 2011, advises undercover operatives how to act during a secondary airport screening. Secondary screenings pose a risk to an agent's cover by focusing significant scrutiny on an operative via thorough searches and detailed questioning. The manual stresses the importance of having a consistent, well-rehearsed, and plausible cover, in addition to cultivating a fake online presence to throw interrogators off track. Meanwhile, the second document, dated January of 2012, presents a detailed overview of EU Schengen border control procedures. There is, however, a larger and potentially more serious question that this issue is now raising. one that can further erode relations between the U.S. and its allies in Europe in light of the NSA phone hacking revelations earlier this year.
So we have a situation, this document is dated 2011, we have a situation where it appears that even though the torture program had been finished by 2009, even though apparently the black sites across Europe would have been closed by 2009, we have covert rather than declared CIA intelligence officers roaming free across Europe. Now the question I think here is actually why? What is the CIA trying to do secretly when it could be working openly with its allies across Europe? So obviously the CIA is trying to implant covert, undeclared agents in their allies' countries. That's the key question, I think, here. So what are they up to? We can but speculate. Perhaps there might be new black sites for, the rendition of prisoners. Perhaps they might be trying to infiltrate corporations, as we've seen with GCHQ and the NSA with the Operation Century Eagle. We just don't know. But I think there's some serious questions to be asked here about exactly what undeclared, covert CIA officers are trying to do when they infiltrate the EU countries.
The article notes that the overview outlines the various electronic security measures, including the Schengen Information System and the European Fingerprint Database, Eurodac, used by border control, and the dangers these measures may pose to agents on clandestine missions. WikiLeaks chief editor Julian Assange explains that these documents show that under the Obama administration, the CIA is still intent on infiltrating European Union borders and conducting clandestine operations in EU member states. The document also demonstrates the CIA's increasing concern over the risks to operatives' assumed identities posed by biometric databases, the very same systems the U.S. pushed for after 9/11. The document is available for download as a PDF file from the WikiLeaks website page, and the direct link to this page will be in the show summary. It seems that the annual traditional Christmas address by the Pope this year was anything but traditional, and by many accounts, it certainly was not jolly. The Huffington Post reported on December 22nd, Pope Francis as delivering a blistering message to the Vatican Curia. The article by Nicole Winfield writes that to the Catholic Church's 7 deadly sins, Pope Francis has added the 15 ailments of the Curia. Francis issued a blistering indictment of the Vatican bureaucracy Monday, accusing the cardinals, bishops, and priests who serve him of using their Vatican careers to grab power and wealth, of living hypocritical double lives, and forgetting that they're supposed to be joyful men of God. Francis turned the traditional genteel exchange of Christmas greetings into a public dressing down of the Curia, the central administration of the Holy See, which governs the 1.2 billion strong Catholic Church. He made clear that his plans for a radical reform of the structures of church power must be accompanied by an even more radical spiritual reform of the men involved. Ticking off 15 ailments of the Curia one by one, Francis urged the prelates sitting stone-faced before him in the marbled Sala Clementina to use the Christmas season to repent and atone and make the church a healthier, holier place in 2015. Winfield also reported that Vatican watchers said they had never heard such a powerful, violent speech from a pope, and suggested that it was informed by the results of a secret investigation ordered up by Emeritus Pope Benedict XVI in the aftermath of the 2012 leaks of his papers. Benedict tasked 3 trusted cardinals to probe deep into the Vatican's backstabbing culture to root out what would have prompted a papal butler to steal incriminating documents and leak them to a journalist. The report is known only to the 2 popes. In very uncharacteristic language for a pope, Francis was alleged to have tossed out some biting zingers. For example, how the terrorism of gossip can kill the reputation of our colleagues and brothers in cold blood, how cliques can enslave their members and become a cancer that threatens the harmony of the body, and eventually kill it off by friendly fire, how some suffer from spiritual Alzheimer's, forgetting what drew them to the priesthood in the first place. According to church historian Alberto Maloney in a separate interview with the Italian news agency, This is a speech without historic precedent. If the Pope uses this tone, it's because he knows it's necessary. Maloney had also spoken of how the Vatican Curia had basically run itself as though the institution was the Pope, answering to no one. Until Francis took charge, no recent Pope had truly paid attention to what was going on in the day-to-day bureaucracy of the Curia. The cardinals, it had been reported, were not smiling, and although Francis greeted each one, there was very little Christmas cheer in the room. Winfield also writes that Francis has said that while this structural reform is moving ahead, what is taking much longer is the spiritual reform of the people involved. Since becoming Pope, Francis appears to be taking a very active and direct role in the overhaul of the Church. Winfield writes, the Vatican's finances are also in the midst of an overhaul, with Francis's finance czar, Cardinal George Pell, imposing new accounting and budget measures on traditionally independent congregations not used to having their books inspected. At the end of the speech, Francis called upon the cardinals to pray for the healing of the wounds that each one carries and for the healing of the Church and Curia also. In financial news for this week, we start with a prediction being made by the man who was former President Ronald Reagan's Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts was confirmed in office by the U.S. Senate and from 1975 to 78 served on the congressional staff where he drafted the Kemp-Roth bill and played a leading role in developing bipartisan support for a supply-side economic policy. After leaving the Treasury, he served as a consultant to the U.S. Department of Defense and the U.S. Department of Commerce. Currently, he is the chairman of the Institute for Political Economy. Roberts was interviewed by King World News on December the 19th and shared what many listeners may perceive as good news, but some may perceive it as bad news, depending upon the perspective one is choosing to take about the coming near future. When asked about his predictions for the near future, Roberts was quoted as saying that at any time the Western house of cards could collapse. It, meaning the financial system, is a house of cards. There are no economic fundamentals that support stock prices, the Dow Jones. There are no economic fundamentals that support the strong dollar. To have a bond market in which the purchasers of bonds have to pay a fee in order to have a negative real interest rate makes no sense. When you buy a bond, you are automatically getting back less than you paid for it. What sense does that make when the United States' debt is exploding and when the money supply is exploding? It makes no sense at all. No American markets make any sense. They're all rigged. I think in 2015, the world will start to see the realignment of power as it drifts away from the West toward Russia, China, India, the BRICS, and the states who ally with them, such as South American countries, who are tired of American imperialism. You will see a shift in the balance of power that will be unfavorable to Washington. Another article appearing a day later on the 20th on the same site, and Roberts predicted that Russia would unleash the ultimate black swan against the West. Sadly, King World News chose to identify this event as quote-unquote terrifying as it introduced the story. There is, however, some truth to this, as there will be many who unfortunately are so attached to the current economic paradigm that the shift away from this paradigm will represent an event of fear to those who have derived their profits and power from having this paradigm in place. For those who have been hurt or held back by the current paradigm, there will be some discomfort for a short period of time. The question to ask might be this: would you be willing to accept a short period of discomfort in order to move into a new paradigm that can lift humanity out of its current enslavement? Or would you choose to remain within a criminal paradigm as a slave for the rest of your life, knowing that you are a slave to that system? Roberts stated the following: suppose the Russian government says, well, since the attack is on the ruble is political, and you guys are attacking the ruble and causing us so much trouble, we are just not going to pay off the next tranche of our debt that comes due early in 2015. Well, the European banking system would collapse because those banks are terribly undercapitalized. Some of them have loans to Russia that almost absorb the entire capital base. So the Russians don't even have to default. They can just say, we're not going to pay this year. The biggest black swan of all is if the Russians get thoroughly angry, all they have to do is call up the European governments and say, we no longer sell natural gas or any other form of energy to members of NATO. The consequence would be the utter and total collapse of NATO. Not even a puppet state like Germany is going to let the people freeze to death, let the factories be closed down, and let the unemployment rate hit 40%. It's just not going to happen. It would be the end of NATO. So whenever the Russians want to destroy NATO, that's all they have to do. Just call up the puppet Merkel, call up the puppet Hollande, the puppet Cameron, and say, you guys really enjoy being in NATO? Well, let me tell you what, we no longer sell energy to NATO members. That's the end of NATO, and that's the end of the cover for American power. That would set off so many black swans. Every banking system would probably collapse, because if the German banks are faced with German industry closing down, what the hell is going to happen to the banks? So all the cards are in Putin's hands. None of them are in Washington's hands. Putin is going to reorient Russia to the east. Then you are going to see Russia, India, and China take over the leadership of the world. According to Roberts, this will start in 2015. The Western media is trying desperately to portray the story that Russia is in a state of collapse and that its currency is also in free fall. This does not appear to be the case at all. A Reuters news service article on December 26 had reported a sharp rebound in the price of the Russian ruble as exporters were selling their dollars. CVN had reported in the last couple of weeks an alleged strategy by Putin to demand payment for oil and gas in gold or U.S. dollars. If a payment was made in U.S. dollars, then the currency was immediately turned around into the purchase of physical gold. The Reuters article still seems to be pushing the cabal message, however, that Russia is nearing collapse, when the evidence, if true, appears to contradict this. I remind listeners that I am not an expert within the realm of the financial markets. The perspectives and interpretations offered are trying to help link whatever is happening on the more 3D level of our current paradigm of living and help open one up to perceiving and co-creating a new paradigm of living and being as we go through these changes. As a personal rule, I generally do not trust any information from any mainstream media source. However, from within that personal rule, I also allow for the possibility that there are tidbits of truth that may be included within a mainstream Western media news story. I am not saying that any other sources of news are any better or any more trustworthy. There is much more taking place than is being revealed within this story at this time. 2015 appears to be the year when something significant is going to take place. There is one black swan that Roberts did not acknowledge, however. This black swan was hinted at in a separate interview conducted on the Silver Doctor's Metals and Markets program on December 19th. In this interview, gold and currency expert Alistair MacLeod offered some revealing insights, including this one.
I mean, I wrote a slightly speculative piece a few weeks back suggesting that actually Russia could go on a gold standard. And the more I think about it, that is actually Russia's nuclear weapon. If they really wanted to screw the West, they would turn around and say, right, we're going on a gold standard. It would take them out of the foreign exchange markets. It would create absolute panic in the gold market amongst the shorts, because they know very well that the Russian government would be in there buying gold very, very aggressively to add to its reserves, at the very least. And I can assure you that under those circumstances, the Russians would make sure that even though the ruble would be fully convertible into gold, that it would be in nobody's interest to convert their rubles into gold, thereby holding the arrangement. And they could do that very, very quickly. They would need to follow it up with stronger measures towards sounder banking, for example, contracting the level of bank credit in the domestic market. They would need to do things like that. But, I mean, for goodness sake, they're doing that with 17% interest rates anyway. So, they're already on that course. So they could do that if they wanted to. They could go on the gold standard. And if they do that, I mean, in the West, we're dead. It is a financial nuclear weapon, really. And I guess that's why they haven't done it. But I would, in a sense, I would like to see them do it, because anything to get us away from this printing of money as the cure of all evils. I mean, we're just going to destroy our own currencies. And when we destroy our own currencies, and we can't even go and buy a loaf of bread, and our elderly are starving, and all the rest of it, that is what I would really want not to happen. And I think if the Russians moved early and prevented us going down that course, however uncomfortable it would be in the short run, then I would certainly support a move like that.
McLeod notes how devastating this might be in the short term, although he also feels that the longer-term benefits would be the best for all. Change is never easy, and it especially is not easy when it is necessary to break humanity from its harmful addictions that have kept people ignorantly enslaved to systems of debt, fear, and separation. There will have to be a period of detoxing from the harmful addicting energies, and this will be more painful for some than others. However, as Iceland has proven, once one makes the choice to bite the bullet and go through the detoxing process, one can come out on the other side stronger and better prepared. This is what humanity and our planet are in the process of doing at this time. The eventuality of a gold standard being introduced appears to be accepted and expected. Other European countries appear to see the writing on the wall. Matthew Lynn, writing for the MarketWatch.com website on December the 18th, wrote that first it was Germany, then Netherlands, Belgium, Austria. Right across Europe, over the course of the last year, a series of European countries have been demanding that their gold reserves, which are often stored in different nations, are brought back home. Traditionally, gold has been stored in cities where there are gold markets, so that emergency trading could be completed if necessary. Lynn writes, however, that the point about having gold on your own soil is that it is an insurance policy against a chaotic return to national currencies. The fact that so many countries seem to want that insurance tells you something important about the euro, and it is hardly comforting. They still think there is a real possibility of collapse. From the current paradigm of existing, we are seeing the global cabal desperately trying to prevent the new economic paradigm from being brought in. This is the paradigm represented by the BRICS alliance, and Russia is the target, as the Western cabal had believed that it could repeat with Russia what it did to the former Soviet Union to cause its collapse. What they had not counted on, it seems, was the response and initiative of Russia and of Putin. Perhaps also they may not have anticipated responses by numerous Southern leaders, and they are becoming bolder in their accusations toward the U.S. and Western influence. Bolivian President Evo Morales being one leader who recently accused the U.S. of being responsible for manipulating and intentionally deflating the price of oil. So the U.S. appears to be losing its economic war against Russia. Putin appears to be holding all the cards, and through it all, he still found time to offer his annual 4-hour unscripted town hall forum interview, fielding all questions, positive and negative. The New Eastern Outlook website offered an article on December 24th detailing the pattern of how the U.S. is losing its economic war with Russia. The article offers information about a secret meeting with the U.S. and Saudi Arabia to intentionally deflate the price of oil as an economic weapon to knock Russia back down. The article notes that Washington had to wait for the Ukrainian crisis to begin in order to drop oil prices in time with the introduction of anti-Russian sanctions. Therefore, in January 2014, the U.S. started taking numerous efforts to destabilize the situation in Ukraine that ended up with a brute force scenario that was facilitated by local oligarchs. One must admit that the overthrow of Viktor Yanukovych and the coup d'etat that took place in Kiev went according to Washington's plan, but few expected that Moscow would take a tough stance on Crimea and that the southeastern Ukraine would be transformed in a center of tough resistance to Kiev, which took power in the country illegally due to both open and hidden support of the West. The article notes information about the US and Iran moving more into agreement, one that would isolate Saudi Arabia more. Internal unrest in Saudi Arabia is also rising, with people upset at the actions of the ruling Al Saud family in following the demands of the US cabal to deflate the price of oil. An attempt to raise the price of oil, according to the article, was made around December the 19th, but apparently the US had to put Saudi Arabia back into its place. The minister responsible, Al-Naimi, had to reverse his statements within a matter of days over the last week, according to the article. Although the U.S. still holds a few cards over other countries like Saudi Arabia, this article notes that Washington has lost all the same. The pillars of Russia's economy haven't crumbled. Therefore, Barack Obama is left with nothing better to do than watch the strengthening ruble and the gradual economic stabilization in Russia. The article closes by noting, "It is also clear that it is imperative to build a different economy that will be less dependent on the West. As for Saudi Arabia, it must draw one conclusion. There's no need to pay for the other country's games against Russia, especially when the king and the crown prince are on their last legs, while ISIL militants are planning the invasion of Saudi Arabia. As of now, Saudi Arabia is following the path that can only lead to the consequent collapse of the ruling royal regime. America is ready to sacrifice its ally only to try to hurt the Russian economy just a little bit more." CVN appreciates the assistance of Phil this week in listening to the longer interview and saving me a lot of time by helping me isolate one of the clips used in this particular story. In general news, are you still one who loves to put down money to buy CDs or perhaps travel to locations for concerts by your favorite artists? Are you one who still believes that your favorite artist is singing with his or her true voice? Would you pay the same amount if you found out that she or he was not singing with his or her true voice? The following are selected excerpts from a report by Daniel Bushell on his program, The Truth Seeker, appearing on RT, and believed to be from early November 2013.
And the best new artist is Milli Vanilli.
Music industry's biggest scandal took place this month in 1990. Milli Vanilli was stripped of their Grammy for Best New Artist.
You know it, yes, you know it's true. Ooh, ooh.
Their worldwide #1, Girl, You Know It's True, wasn't true. It wasn't Rob Pilatus and Fab Morvan's voices in the studio or on stage. The truth came out one concert when the pre-record jammed, repeating the chorus again and again.
I wanted to die. It stopped. Girl, you know it's girl, you know it's girl. 80,000 people. Girl, you know it's girl, you know. You know, I couldn't repeat it 15 times.
The record company says it was in horror at the news, but the industry knew it all along, notes Entertainment Weekly. It was perfectly happy with the deception until the public found out. Its real horror was the industry secret had been leaked. With any singer today, reports Time magazine, you're most probably not hearing their actual voice. Huffington Post reports the real voice of Britney Spears, quote, hurts to hear. It's released her microphone audio without the pre-recorded backing track.
Oh, and she's in control. She loves me, Hollywood girl. Oh, baby, baby, how was I supposed?
Her voice sounds different on the official album. This is what leading record producer told Time.
Let's just say I've had autotune save vocals on everything from Britney Spears to Bollywood cast albums. And every singer now presumes you'll just run their voice through the box.
box, as the industry calls auto-tune, destroys the voice's natural vibration, but puts it in tune with the music. Its inventor, Andy Hildebrand, found the same sound wave vibrations that oil firms use to map the Earth's subsurface could correct the voice. He's blunt on why the technology is being used.
Yes, we fix bad things.
We invited amateur singer Zach into a studio, then auto-tuned his voice to the music.
Recording.
Only you can make this world seem right. Only you can make the darkness bright.
CBS reports even those seen as great singers like Celine Dion today rely on auto-tune. The editor of iPad Music magazine Electronic Sound is Chris Dawes. He writes under the name Push. Chris, it's great to see you. How do you feel about no longer hearing real voices?
Well, a lot of the stuff that I work with and listen to is electronic music. And increasingly, a lot of the electronic music artists are just relying on auto-tuning their voices. And to be honest with you, if I'm hearing a new artist and I hear an auto-tune, I'm out. It's about the imperfections.
Even rock groups which traditionally prized raw, authentic vocals, top producer Tom Bojo says they now rely on auto-tune. Not using it has even become a badge of honor. Some artists like Alison Mora have started printing on their albums that no auto-tune was used on this record. Let's talk to music journalist Joe Vogel. Joe, great to speak to you. What effect is auto-tune having?
When it gets so universal, it takes away from the soul of the music, and actually being able to hear those imperfections in people's vocals. You know, you had singers like Bob Dylan who were praised because their voices weren't great. You know, I mean, he didn't have that traditionally, you know, beautiful melodic voice, but that's kind of why people liked Bob Dylan.
Once upon a time, you've been so fine, soon above the dime in your prime.
The result is singers today can't sing live, notes soul diva Jocelyn Brown, because auto-tune means they no longer train their voice. When a band member said Beyoncé mimed the national anthem at the presidential inauguration, the mainstream reacted with shock, although even the singer herself said everyone's doing it. Chris, if everyone's doing it, why are people shocked and surprised?
It's the secret that nobody dares speak of. When the artifice is stripped away and people see how the reality of how things are put together, that the general public are surprised and shocked.
So obvious it's painful as how CBS reports Madonna's lip-syncing.
I once saw Madonna drop her microphone without it affecting her vocal performance one whit. Then she and her band left the stage altogether for an entire track, without any change in sound or style.
Elton John's considered one of the few big acts today who still sings live. He was surprised Madonna got the Q Awards Best Live Act prize.
Madonna, best f***ing live act. F*** off. Since when has lip syncing been live? Sorry about that, but I think everyone who lip syncs in public on stage when you pay like 75 quid to see them should be shot.
This was his advice for her before last year's Super Bowl performance that CBS reported as painfully obvious miming.
Make sure you lip sync good.
According to Madonna's publicist, quote, Madonna does not lip sync. Let's get a view from inside the industry. Fab Morvan, formerly of Milli Vanilli, really great to speak to you. How common is auto-tune and miming among artists?
Auto-tune is the standard in the music industry today. Another thing is that when people record vocals nowadays, they sing the verse, and then the chorus is recorded just once. Then the chorus is flown in each part of the record. Back in the days, you know, people sang every chorus, so that you don't have this flow of things anymore. It's very sterile.
Fab's turning the Milli Vanilli concept and current trends on their head. He's part of a new wave of musicians that always sings live and uses the real voice on studio tracks.
If audiences start to believe that not even live is live anymore, gig attendance could find itself plunging down the same black hole as the rest of the music business.
The music industry has been attempting to clamp down on free downloading websites like Napster, LimeWire, and now sites like Pirate Bay. On the YouTube page where this video appeared, one individual, identified as Super Guitar Man 69, made the following comment. I am 45. I am a music insider. I am a professional studio musician. I will tell you the 100% truth. Everything you have ever seen since about 2000 is a complete scam. Every piece of music that you have bought, every single piece of music is from a far, far, far inferior musician artist. They are programming you to buy crap. The people you listen to are signed to record deals not for their talent. The talent that do not need Antares or Melodyne vocal tuning devices are still out there, but usually they are serving you drinks, or they are working in bar bands trying to survive. They have their CDs for you to buy on the side of the stage. Those CDs are chock full of great songs, great music, and they're real untuned vocals, or at least minimally tuned. They do not have to rely on the tuner like all artists do that you see winning awards and Grammys. Stop buying any music you have heard on the radio, on the TV. It is a scam, folks. Music, just like sports and movies, have been controlled and doctored for the profit of the few, and it has put significant strains, demands, and pressures on individuals who have a legitimate and sincere joy, passion, and perhaps even gift for singing, and turning them into a commodity which ultimately destroys the passion the individual may have once had. Co-creating a new world where people can freely and joyfully share their gift requires the corrupt paradigms to first be exposed, and then it depends upon people willingly choosing to no longer support companies and individuals who are known to support the commercialistic interests of music, sports, and entertainment. If everyone was willing to simply turn away from those interests and choose instead to support perhaps smaller and more honorable individuals and interests, such as the local street performers, for example, this has the potential to send a clear and powerful message to the greedy handlers controlling the entertainment industry. Their house of cards is also falling, and if one is willing to spend $20, $50, $100, or hundreds of dollars to see something that is not real, then it may as well have been wasted money that could have provided food to a homeless shelter. The link to the full 12-minute report will appear in the show summary. In disclosure-related news for the week, yet another subtle hint has appeared involving Mars and the possibility of life already existing on this planet. Events seem to be happening almost weekly involving this increasingly less mysterious neighboring planet. For the more awake and aware, the implication seems to suggest that something big is happening with this planet, and news is coming out quickly, but at the same time, gently enough to prepare the general public for what seems to be coming very soon. In fact, a couple of articles may have jumped the gun and broken the news. The London Telegraph ran a headline on December 16th stating that NASA makes life on Mars announcement. The article softens the headline just a little bit by writing that a team of NASA scientists say that evidence of life on Mars may have been detected by the American Space Agency's Curiosity rover. An instrument on the six-wheeled robot identified mysterious spikes of methane that cannot easily be explained by geology or organic material transported to the planet by comets or asteroids. If the existence of living, breathing microbes on Mars is confirmed, it will be one of the most monumental discoveries in history. While scientists cannot be sure what is producing the methane, they acknowledge that the source could be bacteria-like organisms. Kenneth Chang, writing for the New York Times, led his story with the headline, "A Great Moment, Rover Finds Methane, a Clue that Mars May Harbor Life." What is particularly noteworthy about the Chang article may be the photo image that the New York Times allowed to accompany the story. For the average eyes, they would not likely notice anything different. To one with some degree of knowledge and awareness, they would notice some clouds at the top of the planet. The presence of clouds by themselves may be suspicious enough, but if the really awake and aware look at the clouds, their position and their shape, the clouds appear to conveniently cover the entrance to inner Mars. Chang writes in his article that a year after reporting that NASA's Curiosity rover had found no evidence of methane gas on Mars, all but dashing the hopes that organisms might be living there now, scientists reversed themselves on Tuesday. Curiosity has now recorded a burst of methane that lasted at least 2 months. For now, scientists have just two possible explanations for the methane. One is that it is the waste product of certain living microbes. An article on the Scientific American website quotes Chris Webster, a senior research scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab and also the lead author on the paper that announced the findings, as saying that most of the methane on Earth is produced by biology, and the hope has been that methane on Mars could be reduced to life on Mars, but we cannot yet distinguish whether the high methane levels we're seeing are being produced geochemically or biologically. The London Guardian wrote that Mars satellites have detected plumes of methane from the surface before, but none as extraordinary as the sudden venting of the gas measured at Gale Crater, where evidence suggests water once flowed billions of years ago. Curiosity, one of NASA's two Mars exploration rovers, landed in the 96-mile-wide crater in August of 2012 and has been exploring the region since. Last year, the U.S. Space Agency reported that Gale contained the remains of an ancient freshwater lake that may have been a hospitable environment for life in the distant past. To many new listeners, this will not seem like big news at all, and by itself, it may not really be considered big news at all. What is important with this story, and indeed with many stories that you will hear over the coming days, weeks, and months, is the larger context of which any story is a part. Unless one has been following the alternative news relating to Mars and understands some of the longer history, and the whistleblowers who have shared their alleged experiences of traveling to Mars and being on the planet, this even slight acknowledgement of the potential of life from NASA represents another step forward in the soft disclosure. How quickly this disclosure becomes will depend upon the people of the planet. You have an opportunity starting next month to help push the politicians in Washington into convening a formal congressional hearing on the issue of disclosure. And this hearing, once called, is very likely to start bringing the house of cards down over the lies and cover-ups that have been perpetrated against humanity since at least the 1950s. The campaign kicks off on January 7th with the posting of the petition on the White House petition website by Stephen Bassett of the Paradigm Research Group. With 100,000 signatures, the people have a unique and potentially powerful opportunity by having this petition permanently posted on the website if the threshold number of signatures can be reached. As well, it would require a response by the White House to decide officially whether or not a congressional hearing will be called on this issue. More details will come in the next week or two. Links will be posted for background information and for registering with the White House petition website so that your voice can be added to the call for the formal hearings that can bring this issue formally and finally out into the mainstream. In tech news for the week, it is becoming clear that significant and major advancements are being made in so many technological aspects of our lives and within our world. The technologies, like money and like the geopolitical and geoeconomic truths that are coming out, are designed to help prepare the collective human consciousness for a transition to a world where we will not need certain things in their current forms, and our collective lives will benefit in a world where we no longer have to do things for the necessity of survival or have things for the necessity of survival, but rather because these things bring greater personal fulfillment, joy, and happiness. On a higher energetic level, there are many who already know and feel that the collective human vibration is moving to a point where each human is becoming increasingly more conscious about the control one has in creating not only one's physical health, but also controlling the operation and construction of one's physical body. Getting to this point, however, is still a bit of a stretch for most humans. To help bridge this gap, however, there are technologies that people can use and see right now that plant the seeds for that future where interim technologies will no longer be needed to help the body. A video put out by Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory on December the 16th offers one such tech story for this week.
Arriving at APL this past summer to participate in an on-site field study with the Modular Prosthetic Limb, MPL, Les Baugh and his girlfriend were excited about the possibilities. Accompanying them is Dr. Albert Chi, who, as part of the interdisciplinary team from the Johns Hopkins Hospital, performed the targeted reinnervation surgery necessary for today's visit.
I went into the surgery knowing that he was going to move nerves in my chest. I remember when I first came out from under it, the pain I'd never had. I don't even remember the original being that much excruciating pain, but I imagine part of that my mind blocked out anyway.
Les had lost both limbs in a freak electrical accident over 40 years ago and is excited to become the first shoulder-level amputee to have the MPL fully and wirelessly integrated into his body.
It started with really intensive training with our pattern recognition system. And what the pattern recognition system is a advanced algorithm that really looks at high-density electrode arrays on the chest muscles, which we've reinnervated, that looks at the almost signature or symphony of muscle activity information, and we take that information and translate that to actual movements within a prosthetic.
Let's go ahead and see what we have.
On this day, Les is being fitted for his socket, which is sort of a body brace that makes the neural connections with the reinnervated nerves, as well as supports the prosthetic limbs.
The first cast they did on me for the test socket was all done with electronics. They took like a scanner and just started walking around my body, and they just painted it on the screen, and boom, they sent it off, and I get out here and it fits. This guy says, no, I can't feel every little dimple and divot that I want to feel. He says, I want to do it with plastic.
Great.
And this old school is working out so much better than the modern.
While the socket got its finishing touches, the team took the next step and had Les work with the virtual reality system that mimics the actual prosthetic arms. A couple days later, the socket was back, and the arms were attached. Les and the team were about to make history.
Once the training sessions were complete and they released me and let me be the computer, basically, to control that arm, I just go into a whole different world.
I think we're just getting started at this point. It's like the early days of the internet. There's just a tremendous amount of potential ahead of us, and we've just started down this road, and I think the next 5-10 years are going to bring some really phenomenal advancements.
Other milestones reached by the team were, this was the first time the MPLs were operated by a shoulder-level amputee at the full 3 degrees of freedom and with over 30 total degrees of motion on both sides with complete intuitive thought-based control.
He has access to all of the different degrees of motion, shoulder, elbow, wrist, hand, but he still needs to select which one he wants to use. So he needs to position the shoulder, then the elbow, then the wrist, then the hand separately and rest in between.
Maybe I'll be able to, for once, be able to put change in a pop machine and get the pop out of it. Simple things like that that most people never think of. And it's re-available to me.
What we'd really like to be able to do is send him home with a couple of limbs so that, you know, he can use them in his everyday life. And what this has showed us is that that's really possible.
All of us on this RP 2009 team, regardless of the type of patient we're fitting, are committed to making every effort to see that this ultimately reaches the end user in a way that they can actually utilize it.
That's awesome.
It's not just the accomplishment, but the opening of frontiers and realizing that there's so much more to learn.
This unique opportunity of interfacing with the end user, utilizing our technology, provides valuable feedback to the team. Feedback that will assist this DARPA-developed technology in helping wounded warriors and others to regain the 27 degrees of freedom possessed by the human arm.
The fact that this technology is now available is a positive sign of even greater things to come. How quickly technologies of this nature do come to the people of the world will depend upon how active people are willing to be in questioning their political representatives about these rules they are making and enforcing without the consent of those who elected them. Holding any civic leader accountable for his or her actions must become the new normal, so that any who are contemplating using any power entrusted to them in a bad way can see that no tolerance will be accepted for any abuse of this power. Electing people who are the visionaries and who can empower the will of the people towards collective success and service will become the future, albeit temporary leaders, as the collective consciousness itself moves into a greater space of awakening where leadership in its current form and practice will no longer be necessary. In health news for the week, it has been mentioned before about the benefits and drawbacks of living in the higher northern or even the higher southern latitudes, as these two regions experience a greater range in terms of daylight hours from the summer season to the winter season. I can only speak personally from the perspective of living in the northern latitudes. During this time of year, where I am currently living, there is perhaps 6 hours of reasonable daylight, and even this is challenging because the sun is quite low on the horizon. The latitude where I currently am is about 60 degrees north. Going further north to a city in Sweden called Umeå, this city is located about 63 degrees north and gets even less sunlight at this time of the year. Unless one has experienced living in a higher northern or southern latitude, one is not likely to grasp and fully appreciate the significance and impact of natural sunlight on the body. It has its challenges, but also its rewards, the rewards coming during the summer seasons. An article by Maddie Savage, appearing on the Swedish English language website, The Local, on December 16th, wrote the following. Not far from the Arctic Circle, in Umeå, there is less than an hour of sunlight on an average day in December. Sometimes the sun doesn't show through the clouds at all. According to the timeanddate.com website, Umeå receives about 4 hours and 20 minutes of daylight, with the sun rising at about 9:30 in the morning and setting at 13:50 hours or about 1:50 p.m. local time. The city, however, has been embarking on several creative initiatives to provide full-spectrum lighting to people of the city to help ease the seasonal affective disorder and depression that can come with a lack of sunlight. Over the last couple of years or so, the city has offered full-spectrum lighting at bus stops in the city, which offers light therapy healing for those waiting for their daily transportation. Now, a new project has been launched involving a local high school. Savage writes that the city of Umeå in northern Sweden has just a few hours of light in the day during December, and a high school in the city has become the first in the country to use solar power to give students light therapy during lessons.
I'm Stellan Andersson, one of the principals at Dragonskolan in Umeå, Sweden, and we are very happy to be one of the first schools ever to offer light therapy to our students in the classroom and in the school canteen.
Andersson was quoted in the article as saying that many people in the city feel tired during the winter here in northern Sweden. For students in particular, it can be hard to focus. Andersson, however, is hoping that the installation of 140 light therapy lamps in 7 classrooms and in the cafeteria earlier in December will make a difference. The article reports that Andersson feels that the project has been successful, although one student interviewed for the article admitted to not yet noticing a significant difference. Others, however, felt more alert and attentive. Savage goes on to write that the lamps offer a brighter light than ordinary bulbs and mimic the sun by offering a full spectrum of light wavelengths. Like sunlight, they also release vitamin D, which helps fight depression. The idea is that while more than 2,000 pupils and teachers at the school will rarely see natural daylight during the week between now and February, they will start to feel as though they have spent more time outdoors. So far, it seems to have been a success. The pupils are happier and have more energy, according to Anderson. What is even more impressive is the source of the power for the therapy light. The article writes that the new therapy lights are solar-powered, with the energy fueling them collected between June and August, when the city enjoyed an unexpected heat wave with 915 hours of sunlight. They were donated by regional renewable energy company Umeå Energy, which previously made international headlines in 2012 when the company installed therapy lights at some of the city's bus stops. According to Agneta Filén, the marketing and sales director at Umeå Energy, we had an excellent summer with lots of sun and we gathered a lot of solar power. We thought about giving back some sun to some of the people most affected by the dark when they needed it the most. Imagine that, a big utility company actually thinking about the needs of its customers in terms of health and not in terms of profit. That concept is unheard of, especially in North America. The article adds that previous studies in Sweden have shown that having brighter lights in classrooms can affect learning, especially during the winter. Both the energy company and teachers at the school are hoping the new light lamps will eventually improve grades at a time when the country's tumbling score in international school rankings is in focus. Anderson admits that it is too early to say if the lights will improve grades, but we looked at lots of research and could not find any studies suggesting the lights could have a negative impact on students, so we wanted to give it a go. Other experts in light therapy have also been quick to praise the trial, which is believed to be the first long-term project of its kind in a Swedish high school. Baba Pense, a senior consultant psychiatrist at Skåne University, believes that the lights will make a difference if they are used throughout the whole season. Of course, it is not a complete substitute, and students are encouraged to get out on their lunch breaks to pick up what little light they can for additional health support. The project represents a collaboration of open minds from within the school, the local power utility, and within the health profession to consider the health of students in supporting their education and growth. Again, this is beyond anything that I am aware of in North America, although I would like to create that initiatives like this will start appearing in northern communities around the world. By way of an announcement this week, I would like to share that the team of Inlight Radio will be taking on some new changes in the coming few weeks. We are currently testing a new platform, and a tentative date for launching the new platform is scheduled for January the 9th. This will be with the Cosmic Vision News broadcast. I will be providing details as soon as possible for how to access the show. CVN and the other Inlight Radio programs will likely be broadcasting on both platforms for a couple of weeks to help people make the transition and also to allow for any technical issues that may pop up. Inlight Radio will also be changing its name to Inlight Universal to reflect the greater role that our team is envisioning in the future, using more than just one type of media for communication. We are looking forward to creating a better service and better quality platform to share our work for global change and healing, and hope that you will feel comfortable joining us on the new platform. On another note, I would like to take a quick moment to acknowledge approximately 45 people who have donated to CVN over the past year. A few of you have felt badly that you could not donate more, and I would like to affirm to you right now that even though what is being shared may be a small amount in numerical terms, it represents a significant amount in what you feel you are able to share at this time. Please know that I value and honor anything that comes from the heart. I have been blessed to have 9 or 10 people who who have contributed greater amounts over the past year because their circumstances may have allowed for that. Several of those have even donated 2 or 3 times, even on the 24th and 25th of December. That some of you took a few minutes away from your families and loved ones over the holiday to think of me means so very much. I would like to give a shout out to CVN listeners Malcolm, John, Roz, Francis, Barbara, Scott, Roger, and especially to Karen and Sam, also to Rob, and to the Hope Chest. Karen and the team at the Hope Chest have played a huge role in allowing me to continue my service over the past year. So to any listeners who have contributed to the Hope Chest, I thank you for supporting this project. You have helped me over the past year also. Several people have graciously offered me their services also. So I offer a heartfelt thanks to Marco, Christina, to Elle, Julia, and also to my colleagues within Light Radio. To Åke and Elizabeth, the owners of the property where I am currently living and staying in Sweden, I'm so very grateful and blessed to have this opportunity to remain in Sweden and in Europe. Of course, I am grateful to have a wonderful and loving family who understand and support my service and my work for global change. So I thank my mother, Dee Dee, and her partner, Dave, and also my sister, Sue, and her husband, Rolly, in particular, but also the many cousins, nieces, and nephews who are in their own ways helping to promote global change and healing. It is my prayer that the coming year will allow me the opportunity to begin visiting and connecting with many of you personally as we move even more into the energies of co-creating this new earth with a consciousness that is in service to humanity, our planet, and our galactic families. With so many people offering incredible gifts and services to the planet at this time, the fact that you are even willing to choose to share your precious time with CVN and with me leaves me humbled. Thank you for inviting me into your homes and into your lives in this moment of now. And in this week's final words, journalism is a profession that often requires a lot of ego and, as many are now witnessing, a lot of sacrificing of one's morals and ethics, assuming that the journalist had those in the first place. It was the main reason I walked away from the broadcasting industry. I had applied for an on-air TV news position at one of the few small-town TV markets in the province of Ontario, if not the entire country of Canada. It was considered the prime training ground, and I was nurturing dreams of being a TV news anchor and sitting in the chair of the national news anchor at the company I had been doing an internship at, leading up to my graduation. During the interview, I was told by the manager that he had narrowed it down to 2 people, and that I was one of them. He called me a few days later to tell me that I did not get the job. By pure chance, I was talking to a woman in the journalism program at Ryerson University in Toronto, where I was studying the radio and television arts program. It turns out she had applied for the job and was told the same story, and that she did not get the job either. I caught the manager in a lie, and I called him out on it. He admitted that he was being pressured to hire the son or the nephew of someone who was part of the company that owned the station. I told him that this was not a very honorable way to do one's job. He didn't have the courage to be honest. A short while later, I was offered a job with an airline loading and unloading aircraft, a far cry from the anchor desk, but I thought it would allow me a chance to travel, maybe even become a foreign correspondent, which could perhaps be a faster ticket to an anchor desk. Within 2 weeks of starting with the airline, the manager at this small TV station called me back and offered me a job. Suddenly, I was faced with what may have arguably been the biggest choice of my life up to that time. I could stay in the airline job, even though it was part-time, and stay true to my morals and ethics, or choose to sacrifice my morals and ethics to get the training for the dream job I thought I wanted. I thanked him for calling, but I told him that this is not how I wanted to enter the profession, and if I started this career by sacrificing my morals, it would only go downhill from there. So I declined the job. I promised myself I would only return to the industry when I could do my newscast on my terms, without the censorship, ego, and backstabbing that I had been witnessing in the industry and among many classmates in my program. I sometimes wonder if I made the right choice. Had I been stronger back then, armed with all the knowledge I now have, I think I could have taken that job and it would not have been a sacrifice because I would have known how to handle the game, or at least handle it better. I was very likely not ready, however, and that was my first test to see if I was going to be strong enough to start following the path that would bring me to the service I am now finally offering to the world. Strong is a relative word, however, and just because one is strong in one or more aspects of one's life path does not necessarily mean that one is strong in all of them. Many people are strong in their careers, but have little or nothing to offer in relationships. Some are extremely dependent upon relationships with another and are unable or unwilling to be strong and independent. Countries around the world have a range from one end of the scale to the other as far as how roles are traditionally perceived in relations between partners. It's not very often that a journalist puts him or herself out on a limb by being vulnerable with one's readers, listeners, or viewers. I am about to do this, and I hope you can allow me this and perhaps find something meaningful in your own life path to take from my experiences. 2 listeners wrote to me last week. Malcolm and Phil shared with me their observation that my energies seemed to be a little bit off lately. Malcolm offered a caution that I be careful about my taking or talking about the bigger picture and the bigger picture because I may lose people and it may seem like I am rambling. He sensed from my show last week that I am working through stuff, but he offered his support and said that I had to carry on. I replied to them both that I appreciated what they shared. Indeed, there are times when I wonder if I am just rambling. I told them that there are times when I feel I am losing my focus. Is it the shifting energies, or is it something else I go through every Christmas season? The most honest answer would be that it is both. I cannot deny the changing energies I am perceiving and observing upon our planet and within human and planetary consciousness. At the same time, it's Christmas. Here is part of what I wrote in my reply to their messages to me. I wrote that although I no longer resonate with the religious traditions, I still resonate deeply and strongly with the romantic traditions. But I have not had a special woman in my life to share this with for so many years that I go through periods of feeling very low. It is something that I am obviously creating, and I look to no one but myself for the source of this subconscious creation. And it is repeating because it seems I am not learning the very lesson or lessons of which I spoke about last week. I wish I knew what that lesson was. I live my life in a way that is very hard for most to understand, let alone accept. I wrote to them that I live my life for humanity, our planet, and our galactic families. I would give up anything on a personal level, a relation, children, and I would be willing to lay down my life if it meant the difference between our world changing now or 2 years from now. For just a few weeks a year, however, I allow myself to desire and wish for one thing at Christmas that is for me and only for me. Over all these years, I still have not found the key to unlock the secret that will make this particular wish come true. I already know one listener who has probably already begun opening up her email to write a response to me about this because she has commented to me before on this topic. She has told me that to focus on any kind of 3D relation at this time may not be relevant because so many of us will soon be meeting our twin flames. Meeting our twin flames, however, comes with risks and consequences. When one meets one's twin flame, everything, and I mean everything, is mirrored back to you about yourself. From what I understand or think I understand, it could be an experience that feels like all your buttons are being pushed at the same time, and for most, it will be very overwhelming. To be honest, I'm not so sure I'm ready yet to meet my twin flame. I feel that there are some lessons and experiences I need to facilitate the growth and healing that will prepare me and any potential partner. It is a journey that we both must be willing to take on as courageously, as compassionately, as gently, and as openly as possible, with a desire to uplift the other as much as possible for her or his highest good. I share this, however, for two reasons. One, it is my hope that by sharing it, I can bring the energies of the experience out into the open and perhaps for greater release and healing. The other reason is that there may be some of you out there who will resonate with what I am sharing, regardless of whether you are single or with a partner. If there are any among you who have been perceiving that I have been rambling in the newscast over the last few weeks, or perhaps that I am rambling now, please forgive me for that. I choose not to be a journalist who hides behind the name of a company to dig up dirt on others for personal gain, or who will promote an agenda that depends upon the enslavement of humanity, the perpetuation of a criminal system of fiat banking currency, and a criminal system of commercial admiralty law. I will not support an agenda that supports the destruction of our planet for profit, power, and greed. If I have to continue living with less financial abundance and remain single for the rest of my life path to accomplish this, it is my heart's desire to do so, or die trying. I would like to create that I am sufficiently protected in this service so that I will not be affected by any negative energies or entities that will attempt to prevent this service. Some journalists are perceived as celebrities, although I do not see myself as any more or any less than each of you. I, like you, am fulfilling my service wherever and however it leads me. I am still learning this journey of growth, and I have no right to place myself above anyone because I am still making mistakes to learn from, assuming I choose to learn the lessons. I am walking this path alongside each of you, not in front of you nor behind you. I seek to empower each of you in your uniquely different yet equally beautiful way to be all you can be so that our world will change that much more quickly. I cannot tell you how to be when I am still learning how to be in my own way. All of you who have someone special in your life at this time and who are hearing my voice right now, I would like to ask you for a Christmas present. I would like you to go and find that special person in your life and give her or him a long hug, and then take his or her hand and go and do the most spontaneous, romantic thing that comes to your mind in that moment. A horse-drawn sleigh ride, cuddling on the sofa to a romantic movie, a walk to the beach to watch the sunset or the rising moon, anything that will bring a spark of romance to your world in this moment of now. If you would be willing to commit to doing something spontaneous and romantic at least once a day for the next 7 days to bring in the new year, I would consider this to be a wonderful gift that you could offer me this holiday season, even more than financial support. Create and then make manifest your highest vision for the coming year, and I celebrate that with each of you. Thank you for another wonderful year. Blessings for health, joy, protection, and abundance on all levels to each of you and all around you. Create a wonderful week and create a wonderful new year for your highest good and that of all on our planet. Until our next moment of now, peace be with you and all around you. So that is the unfolding consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is a part of the Enlight radio group of programs. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary on the blog at cosmicvisionnews.com. on the CVN Facebook page, and also on YouTube, Scene, FaceUni, Ello, Google+, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West. Sending along blessings to all of you for your kindness, your energies of support, and for inviting me into your home and your lives. Thank you for working alongside me in co-creating a new earth in energies of love, service, and true peace. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your heart, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.